Hello and welcome to Chapter 3 of the Splitting Atoms podcast, the podcast where we take a deep dive on the narratives of the nuclear industry here in Canada. I'm your host, Caitlin Stone, and today I'm at the offices of the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, and I'm joined by its president, Laurie Swami. So welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
Yes, we're very excited. I know there was some scheduling challenges that we had to work through. We're both busy women, I suppose, but I'm very happy to be here, and I think we're going to have a really insightful and helpful conversation, because when we're talking about nuclear waste, there is maybe some misconception or a lack of awareness for some people that could lead to questions or a little fear or a misunderstanding. So I'm very excited. Before we dive in on NWMO and your role and the great work that's being done here by your team, a little bit about yourself. So you are no stranger to the energy sector. You have devoted a lot of your skill sets and talents to the energy world and nuclear energy. Before joining NWMO in 2016, correct, you worked with another of our leaders in the industry, Ontario Power Generation. You were there as the Senior Vice President of Decommissioning and Waste Management. Is
That's
that correct?
Right. Yeah? That's right. Absolutely.
So not only in the nuclear sector, but you really have spent a lot of time safeguarding our management and solutions for the waste side of our equation. But is my understanding, when you were deciding on schools and what to do for your educational and your career, engineering maybe wasn't your first thought. You were thinking of maybe going to school to become a doctor for med school.
That is true, but I ended up with engineering, which has turned out for me to be a very good career choice.
I would say it turned out for the entire nuclear industry and the energy sector to be a very good choice. We're very fair. It's too bad you're not more of an ambitious person. I mean, doctor, engineer, no one taught you to really raise that bar for yourself,
no,
I guess.
No, not at all.
I joke, of course. We're very glad that you chose this industry and this career path. So let's look at NWMO. You are a cornerstone of our industry and you play a vital role. Can you give us, without having to go into too much detail, what is your role and your position within the nuclear industry here in Canada?
So the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, or NWMO, was formed in 2002 with the sole purpose of developing and implementing Canada's plan for the safe long-term storage of our used nuclear fuel. So all of the nuclear fuel from all of the operating plants in Canada. So that was our initial mandate, and certainly we've been working through that process for the past number of years, 22. Last year, though, we were given another mandate, which is to look after intermediate level waste as well. And I sort of put it in the place of, we are the DGR people, or the Deep Geologic Repository people, so used fuel and intermediate level waste needs to be safely stored in an appropriate geosphere. So that's what we do.
Interesting. So very important work. And we're going to get into some of the things that you just touched on in more detail as we move along. But I think maybe a great starting off point is, let's give some clarity on what it is we're even talking about. So when we think of nuclear waste, what is that? What form does it take? What does it look and feel like? Because I think everyone would answer this based on what they've learned from shows like The Simpsons, right? I think that's what jumps into everyone's mind. So
certainly does. But I thought before I got too into the waste, yep, I talk a little bit about the sector, because I think this sector is quite important. The nuclear sector provides a significant amount of electricity to Canadians. That's one thing that the sector does. It also provides medical isotopes, so saves the lives of many Canadians as well as internationally. So really important part of our world. It's also a really important contribution to Canada's climate change plans. So very important. And our role in that is to make sure that the sector can move forward. So we need to have waste solutions that will allow that to take place. So having said that, there are many, many benefits from nuclear, and then there's this thing called waste that everyone seems to have concerns about. And so when we talk about the different types of waste, there's used fuel, and that has to be managed for millions of years, and that's what we're tasked with doing. There's also, and it's a solid. It's definitely a solid. It's not a liquid. It's not what you think about on The Simpsons. There's other waste forms as well. So there's intermediate level waste, which is the material that comes out of the plant, used components from the plant, resins, those types of things that have actually seen a little bit of the reactor, if you will. And then there's low level waste, which is just the normal waste that's generated from industrial processes, so cleaning rags, things of that nature. Low-level waste doesn't require a deep geologic repository. It can be safely managed within a 300-year period, so in a normal landfill type of facility. So that's the different types of waste. And what we're going to talk about is really used fuel and how do we manage that.
That high-level waste.
High-level waste.
Yeah, and it's funny because again, I think people have these conceptions of what they feel it looks like or what maybe they have been led to believe by popular culture of what it looks like, but it really has such a different form. You wouldn't recognize it if you saw it in some scenarios. Yeah.
Well, here it is. Not used fuel,
You speak of the devil, yeah.
This is what it would look like if we were actually sitting beside a used fuel bundle.
Because what this is so the used fuel goes inside of these little rods, and that is where it is stored. That's just one of the barriers that is used to store
That's
that
correct.
used fuel.
So when the fuel is manufactured, the pellets are put inside the pencils that go into the used fuel bundle.
Okay, yeah.
And so when it comes out of the reactor, it essentially looks exactly the same, and it's in the same form. But all of those that we count on in the reactor itself are still there as barriers for containing the radioactivity. And so that we count on as well in our disposal system.
Okay, very interesting. And when we're talking about the high-level fuel, how much? Because I think this is a question not a lot of people think to ask. What does that look like? How much waste are we producing?
Sure. So today there's about 3.3 million bundles, so 3.3 million of these that has been generated through the generation of from the beginning of the nuclear program until today. We estimate that by the time we get through the life extensions that are planned for the reactors and the ongoing operation, we'll have about 5.6 million bundles. And when you look at that, so that's very interesting, but what does
it mean?
What does that look like?
That's right.
So if you stack up the 3.3 million bundles in hockey rinks to the top of the boards on the hockey rink, you have 9 of those hockey rinks full of material.
Interesting.
Which is not an awful lot considering the operations have been ongoing since the 60s.
And the output that represents, right? The electricity that we have utilized from that and benefited from. I think it really puts it in perspective. There are so many industries that create mass amount of waste, whether it's the clothes we wear or the vehicles that we're driving, the food industry, and no one really gets as concerned or asks as many questions or maybe has as many fears about that kind of waste. There's something special maybe about putting the word nuclear in front of it where people really start to get that concern and they want to know, well, what are the solutions? So when you put it into that perspective, 9 hockey arenas to the board, especially in comparison to what we have benefited, and the benefit, we're only reaping it more and more as we become a group or a society that wants more electricity. I mean, everything we do is electrified. So, that's very interesting.
We actually have our arms around this situation. Unlike many other sectors or industries, we hear about plastic pollutions, we hear about all of those other things. But in our case, we have always been managing the waste. We know exactly where all of the material is. It's safely stored at the stations today, so we know where it is. We know how to handle it. We know the technical solutions around a disposal program, and we're funded for it. So the money has been set aside so that we will always have sufficient dollars to be able to pay for the disposal programs. And I think that's very unique and makes me very proud to be part of the nuclear sector because it's so well taken care of.
We're such a regulated industry, and safety, I think the term safety first must have been born in our nuclear world because it really is. It sounds cliche, but everything we do has that in mind, whether it's safety for the people working in the industry, but also for what we're leaving for future generations and how we're handling, like you said, the waste. I think a lot of industries create what I call free-range waste, where it gets put out into the air, into the waters, into the ground, or what have you. And it's just free range. It's been released back into the wild, whereas we don't have that mindset here in nuclear and within the NWMO organization and your partnership organizations. It's a very good point, very fair point. And so obviously we have nuclear waste, as we talked about, since we're already operating and consuming nuclear energy. What are the storage solutions currently in place?
So today, the used fuel is removed from the reactors and put into bays inside the plants. And it will sit there for between 7 to 10 years, depending on the facility. And after that, it is moved into dry storage. So there's a few different designs around that, but essentially it's moved. It's safely put into containers that can sit in buildings or out in the open, actually, for containing the material. And at the end of the day, it will move to our facility, a deep geologic repository, where we'll move it into another barrier system that we'll be able to place underground, and that will be the final disposal for the used fuel. So it's very well managed today, and there are different parts of the program, but in essence, we're meeting all of the international standards. So this is what our other countries do with their used fuel as well. Very, very similar programs, and we work closely with them to make sure that we're all making each other better from that perspective.
And so as we look forward, why can't we continue with just storage we have today? We're going to talk about the DGR. Why is that solution needed in terms of long term?
So a couple of things I would bring to bear on that is firstly, the containers that we put it in, the dry storage containers that it goes into, their lifespan is about 50 years. Now there may be ways to extend that life, but that's an engineering problem with a solution that needs to be developed. So that doesn't last forever. And even if we did that, we'd have to reprocess it every 50, maybe 100 years and put it in new containers that could then safely contain it. It has to be for, 10,000, a million years. It really doesn't matter. That assumes we'll have the capability to do that over and over and over again, which is just not practical. We need to find a solution that's a long-term solution. The second part of it is, very important to us is to find a community or communities that are willing to host this facility. The existing plants will shut down at some point, maybe 50 years from now, I'm not sure. But at some point they shut down, and that community would be left with a nuclear waste disposal system that they didn't agree to. And so we have to respect everyone's rights in Canada to accept that they're going to take on a used fuel facility.
So what I'm hearing is we have a really great and safe solution that is working right now, but in a world and in an industry where I think collectively nuclear understands better is a destination, it's not somewhere we're ever going to fully arrive, it pulls us, it's our North Star. That's what we're looking for, is a long-term, better solution that brings in new technologies, new advancements, and new knowledge that's going to give us a solution. It's not that this solution is by any means not fantastic for its purpose today. We just want something that is going to take the strain off of some of those challenges you just spoke of.
Yes.
Yeah, so I want to dive in more on what the projects we're working on right now that will lead us into the future. So before we dive in on that conversation, I want to take just a moment and give acknowledgement to our partners on today's episode. They are leaders in construction. It is PCL Nuclear. In the realm of nuclear construction, PCL's impact is profound and far-reaching. Their projects are characterized by meticulous planning, rigorous safety protocols, and groundbreaking construction solutions that set new benchmarks for the industry. They specialize in constructing facilities that support the generation of clean and reliable energy, contributing to global efforts in reducing carbon emissions and combating climate change. By integrating advanced methodologies and sustainable practices, PCL Nuclear ensures that each project not only meets today's energy needs, but also safeguards the environment for future generations. With a reputation for excellence and an unwavering commitment to innovation, PCL Nuclear is leading the charge in building the infrastructure that powers the future. As we look now to what work is being done currently, it's all under the umbrella of the Adaptive Phased Management Program that your team is operating. And part of that, there's some technical sides and many elements to it, but part of it is under what you've already alluded to, the Deep Geological Repository System, the DGR. There's a reason we shortened that one up because I almost tripped over it. So with that program, I'm sure a lot of research and development and input has come in. What exploratory work has your team done to get us to this point where this is the solution?
So a lot of work has gone into developing what the technical solutions are for disposal of used nuclear fuel. This is international and in Canada. And our team has worked on that element of it for many, many years now. We started looking at what is the appropriate geosphere or the rock that we have to place the used fuel into. We've looked at doing investigations at the surface, below surface, on the very rock that we're talking about now. We've looked at how to do safety analysis to demonstrate that it's safe. We've done engineering studies and developed what the engineering program would be. We've developed what we call an engineered barrier system, and fundamental to that is the used fuel container that we'll be using to place the bundles in and then move them underground into the deep geologic repository. So essentially a deep geologic repository, broadly speaking, is a mine that we mine for the select purpose of making sure we have a disposal system for the used fuel. And so that's the work we've done on the technical side of it, but we've also done other things. We've looked at transportation, looked at international transportation routes. We've looked at how it would have, we would transport materials all the way from New Brunswick, Quebec, the Ontario plants, to the selected site in Ontario. And just as a point of interest, there is a lot of radioactive transportation going on every day across the world, and a lot of that is taking place in Canada. So this is a very safe activity as well. And then the final thing we look at is how do you work with people? So what kind of things appeal to people? What type of way do we talk to people and make sure that they're getting the information they can? So we've done a lot of work on that side of it, is how, from a social science perspective, do you work with people and making sure they're getting their voices heard?
And I would imagine this isn't a scenario. You talked about site selection. It's an exciting time for us in our industry because we know that site selection, we're moving closer towards our target, which we're all really excited for. But you don't just go into these communities and say this is happening and we're here. What has the process been on finding and engaging with and working towards alignment with the communities who are eager to have this come to their doorstep, who want this in their community?
So we at the NWMR are equally excited about selecting a site. We've been working on that since 2010, so that's a very long process. And you're right, there are many, many steps towards it. We started off just talking to leadership within communities, making sure they understood what the project was about, what this could mean, and we entered into what we call learn more agreements. This allowed communities to learn without committing, because I think the first thing you don't want to do is say, well, we've decided we're going to take this material. It's a very difficult topic. You have to work through many things. So we did that, and at that very beginning stage, we actually had 22 communities in Saskatchewan and Ontario come forward to say, we'd like to learn more. So they entered those agreements and spent time with us. And at the time that was taking place, we were learning more with them, giving them opportunities to visit, to understand what nuclear is, because some of them don't know that, understanding what waste is, and getting to really familiarize themselves with the program. Slowly but surely, we whittled it down to where we are now in two areas, one in northwestern Ontario with Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation and Ignace, and one in southern Ontario, which is Saugeen Ojibwe Nation and South Bruce. And so we're still working with those two communities to make sure they understand the program, understand what this means. And of course, as you get fewer and fewer areas, you do more and more detailed technical work as well as engagement work, giving them all the opportunity to see and feel what this project could mean to a community.
And I know your organization, it's so important for you and your team to be working with communities, engaged with communities, and having that two-way communication and interaction, so there's an understanding from both levels. You mentioned both of those sites are including Indigenous communities, not just with the DGR, but on so many different projects and initiatives. You work with Indigenous communities. How important is that partnership to you, and the value that that brings in finding better, stronger, more agreeable maybe solutions that everyone benefits from?
So working with Indigenous people is critical to the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. And in fact, we were the first company in Canada to actually implement a reconciliation policy. And so we've been working under that policy for many years now. We have an Indigenous knowledge policy where we explicitly require our programs to take into consideration Indigenous knowledge and ways of thinking. And so we've been building along that process for many years, but it's really talking one-on-one with people, really understanding what their concerns, needs are, and making sure we're reflective of that in our work. And a few examples, I guess, I could give is when we've been doing field work in both South Bruce and Ignace area, we've had members from Saugeen Ojibwe Nation or Wabigoon actually on the site monitoring our work, making sure we were respectful of their way of thinking. And that's been very helpful for us, not only for making sure we're doing it the right way, but also for building relationships and making sure people understand our projects. So a lot of that type of work is taking place on a regular basis.
It's never bad to have more perspectives and ideas in the rooms, right? The more awareness, the more knowledge.
Absolutely.
Really, it enhances it for everyone. And so looking past with the DGR and some of the initiatives happening, on a broader scale, what are some of the projects and partnerships that NWMO is working on right now that really excite you, that really you think people may not be aware of, but that they should be a little bit more?
Sure. So as part of our willingness process, so this is a community has to say whether they're willing to host, and we need to understand that. So in both areas, that would be the First Nation would demonstrate willingness, and as would the municipality. But in order for community members to have any sense of what this means, they understand the project, they may understand everything, they also need to understand the benefits. And so we're in the midst of negotiating with the communities for potential hosting agreements. And we're very excited because we've signed 2 of those, first with Ignace in the north, and just last week with South Bruce. And very exciting to have that happen. I can tell you it's a very emotional moment, very historic from my perspective. And really excited about that moving forward. And of course now we're working with the First Nations, as we have been for some time, on the same type of agreements that'll allow us to move forward in one of the 2 areas.
It's incredible when you think of how much work and stress and passion has been put into these projects to see these milestones being reached, and what it means, yes, not only for our industry and for future generations, but for the people who they have left their mark on what Canada is going to benefit from as we move forward. They really have left their footprints in the history of what is being developed here and what the world is looking to us, right? We are leaders in nuclear, hockey and nuclear. Those are our big claims to fame as Canadians. But so it's incredible work, and congratulations to you and your team on that. I know it's cliche, but I very often call our industry a superhero industry. There are few sectors that I think contribute in so many different ways that nuclear does. Obviously we produce clean, affordable, and consistent energy, but what you had mentioned earlier about the environmental impacts and our goals for net zero tomorrow, medical grade isotopes that are in the fight against cancer, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of what we're doing here. So for those who are looking to build careers that can be very specialized, there's really not any job role that I can't think of that exists here within our industry, but has those extra benefits of that bigger picture legacy leaving impact. Nuclear is the place to be. Now, I might be a little biased, but I think it's a pretty healthy bias. So I want to thank you so much for your time today, Laurie. It has been an insightful and engaging and a lovely conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's it for Chapter 3 of the Splitting Atoms podcast. Thank you so much to Laurie and her entire team here at the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. They were fantastic to work with. I want to thank you, our audience members, for joining us for another conversation on the narrative of nuclear here in Canada. And of course, a big thank you to our partner on this episode, Leaders in Construction, PCL Nuclear. Until next time, I'm Kaylin Stone, your host, and thank you for splitting atoms with me.